Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, a young couple, high school sweethearts, married after a pregnancy. The husband, eager to provide, took over his father's construction business, increasing his workload significantly. Amidst his long hours, he discovered his wife's affair with her stepbrother. Confrontation led to separation. He disclosed the truth to her family at a barbecue, causing uproar and estrangement. Now let's get into the story. I, 25 male, met my wife, 24 female, in high school. We were friends during the first few years. I always had a crush on her and asked her to prom during our senior year, and we've been together ever since. We ended up getting married about 6 months after graduation because she got pregnant. That's not to say that we didn't love each other. She was my best friend, the person who meant the most to me in the entire world. We just had to rush things along a little bit. We both come from a small, conservative town and people talk. We thought it was the best option for us. She has always been close with her family, closer than I was with mine. Sometimes I thought it was strange, but the more I was welcomed into it, I was a little jealous. Her family shared things, and everyone was genuinely happy to be around each other. Her mom had remarried shortly before we got together, so she had a new stepfather and stepbrother and sister. We moved out into our own apartment and started living our life. She got a job helping at the library in town, and I started working at my dad's construction company. Everything was going very well for us. Her mom helped with the baby a lot. We enjoyed a simple life with good friends and a loving family. For years later, not much had changed, but my father told me he was retiring and I would be in control of his construction company. With this promotion came a huge increase in pay. We were going to be able to buy a house and start saving up for college. I was ecstatic. However, the workload was surprisingly much more than I thought it would be. I was used to working 4 10-hour days, but with my new responsibilities, I was working 5 to 6 days a week and averaging about 70 total hours. I could feel the strain it was putting on my marriage, but I figured it was the best way to make sure our kids had everything they needed. Things went on like that for a while. All the while when I was at work, she would be home or with her family. I didn't expect anything was going on. Even having suspicions about it seemed wrong. But here I am writing this post. During the spring and summer, work always gets incredibly busy, so I'm around at home less and less. Recently, I'd noticed that my wife's stepbrother was coming around more often to hang out while I was out. It seemed perfectly normal. He was with his stepsister and nephew. I had no reason to suspect anything else was happening. He called her and texted her. They would chat on Snapchat all the time, things that I interpreted as normal activity. One night I was off work and my wife and I were alone watching a movie. I ran to the kitchen to get us some popcorn and I saw her phone on the table. I didn't immediately decide that I was going to go through it. I picked it up, planning on just bringing it to her because she left it there. When I hovered over the screen, I saw that she had a message from her stepbrother asking for her to think of an excuse to go to his house. I thought it was weird. My mind didn't immediately go to the reality of what was happening. While the popcorn was still in the microwave, I did a quick look to see what the context of the message was. They were both exchanging suggestive messages about wanting to be together again. He even said how he'd had a thing for her since before their parents got married. My wife agreed and said that it was unfortunate they never had a chance to explore what they had. I scrolled further back and saw messages and videos they'd shared with each other. I felt sick to my stomach. I actually thought I might collapse on the ground and vomit. No, they're not blood related, but they're still family. It was disgusting to me. On top of that, she'd been hanging out with him in her home with our child. My mind ran through countless different scenarios of what could have happened. Right away, I confronted my wife. We had a huge blow-on argument which resulted in her storming out, no doubt going to her stepbrother. I began looking into divorce the following morning. I considered my options about what to say to her family too. She came back late the next day and we had a discussion. I was still very angry. Our child was home and awake, so I didn't want to upset him. She begged me not to tell anyone about it, saying it would destroy her family. She tried to convince me it was a momentary lapse in judgment, but I wouldn't listen. I told her I wouldn't tell her family, but I knew that was a lie. She betrayed my trust, so I was going to get back at her. A few months had passed and she and I ended everything. I moved out and we were still in the midst of figuring out custody. I had no idea what she was telling her family about our separation, but I told mine the truth. I picked my son out from her house and he told me all about a huge family barbecue they were having the following weekend. It was the perfect time for me to come clean. Nobody had any idea I would even be going to the event. I just showed up uninvited. Everyone was curious about why I was there. I definitely didn't feel welcome, so I figured I'd make my point and then leave. I joined a group of people at a table including her mom, stepdad, and stepbrother, and I told them everything I knew. Her stepbrother looked like he wanted to leap over the table and strangle me, but instead he denied my claims and called me a liar. I think everyone around us knew that his impassioned denial was too defensive to not be at least a little bit true. Her mom pulled me aside and asked me how I knew. I could tell it broke her heart, and I felt bad about being the one to tell her, but she needed to know. I ended up leaving the barbecue with my son for the rest of the weekend. Apparently, neither of them is welcome at any other family gatherings, and most of her family thinks they're disgusting for what they did. Today's second story. In this story, OP meets his wife, June, through mutual Facebook connections at a conference. They quickly connect, date, and marry. However, their marriage deteriorates when June becomes distant and eventually has an affair with a wealthy client. The husband discovers the affair, confronts them, and exposes June's actions to her family and employer. They divorce, leaving the husband emotionally scarred but determined to move on. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I were married for 2 years before the unexpected happened. June and I first met at a business conference we attended. She sat in front of me, and that was how I noticed she was one of my mutual Facebook friends, and we had never spoken to each other before. She was just one of those girls I would stumble on her cute pictures and valuable business content. June was famous on Facebook, and she had many followers mainly because of the helpful tips and other life-related content she shared. I wasn't expecting to see her at that conference, especially since it was in another state. Still, I was happy to finally meet her in person and thank her for all the information she had been sharing with us for free. So I waited after the conference to introduce myself, and we clicked immediately. She was easy to talk to, and talking to her felt great. Although she didn't recognize me at first, I wasn't expecting her to, but she looked me up on Facebook and confirmed we were mutual friends. I thought that would be the last time June and I would speak to or see each other. She was one of those witty, classy girls, and I was just a regular guy with a monotonous lifestyle and work pattern. Later that evening, I was at home watching my favorite show when I received a message from her. I was so thrilled and excited that I responded as soon as I got it, and from that first message, many more followed. We did not talk about ourselves. There were random things we learned at the meeting. After that day, we spoke occasionally until one evening. I posted something on Facebook that required people to share their opinions, and she sent me a message. That message changed many things for us because from there, we became closer friends than mere Facebook friends. I worked for a fast-growing tech company and I earned well. Being the business and career-driven woman she was, she worked with a real estate company. She was one of their best employees because she could get big clients and sell properties worth a lot. I won't lie, I liked her from the first time I saw her at the meeting, but I didn't think she would like someone like me, especially since I believed I was not as bright as she was. Eventually, we started going out for lunch and dinner or would stroll or drive around the city. Our friendship grew fast, and I liked how it was going. Aside from being witty, June was gorgeous. She was average height, perfect for me, and she checked out every point on my girlfriend's material list. Even before I asked her out, I was spoiling her with things. I bought her chocolates, gifts, flowers, and the little things that could make a woman happy. After we had gained each other's trust and love, I popped the question down the line, and she said yes. That was one of my happy moments. I even promised to get her a good life. She didn't move in with me, but we visited each other a lot, and if she wanted, she could spend the weekend at my place. After she said yes to me, one of the things I did was change our relationship status on Facebook, so people could know we were together. I also posted her pictures a lot, or would share any of her content I liked. She barely posted my pictures except it was my birthday, but the love-struck Poppy and me didn't let me ask questions about that. Because I loved her, I did literally everything for her. I supported her emotionally, financially, and whatever she needed. Every month, I would outdo myself and get her something better than the last gift I gave her. I took her shopping, bought her the things she loved, and spent quality time with her. I loved June so much and could not stop thinking about her even as we dated. I wanted her to be in my life forever, and I knew it would be good for our kids if I married her. I read somewhere that kids inherited their smartness from their mothers, and for me, June was the perfect mother for my kids. I won't say I didn't benefit from her too. I did, and her influence alone in my life pushed me to be a better person and take life more seriously. We dated for a year and some months, and when I was tired of dating, we married each other. Initially, being married to June was more fun than I thought. We were so happy, and we did almost everything together. June was affirmative, so she always reminded me that she loved me. She said it in the morning, during the day, and even before she went to bed, and it made me feel great. We weren't kids lovers, so we didn't talk about children until we felt ready. June was a hard worker, and if there was anyone who could convince you to do something you didn't want to do, it was June. She was very good at persuasion, and I learned that from her. The first year of our marriage was full of fun. Our intimate life was hot. We loved getting intimate and didn't mind doing it many times a week. As time passed, I no longer had to go to the office and started working from home. This was a year after Corona happened, and working from home became allowed in my organization. I don't know why, but my friends believed June, and I would not last. They said we were two different people and didn't think June would settle with a man like me. It hurt to hear that from my close friends, but I believe they were jealous that I ended up with someone as famous and intelligent as June. I really wanted to prove them wrong, but sadly they were right. One day, June came home and told me about a big client her company had assigned her to. The man was super rich and she was going to sell him a big property, but it would take time because he required a lot of follow-ups, traveling to meet with him and all. I didn't have an issue with that because it was her work. I was very happy for her because I knew the kind of raise she would get from a client like that, and I even encouraged her to do her best. A few weeks after June told me about this client, I noticed many changes in our marriage. She was always on her phone and could stay on a call for hours. I knew part of it was business because I could hear her conversations, but I didn't like how distant we had become. She also traveled a lot and barely spent time with me. If the weekend came, she would dress up early in the morning, and the next time I'd see her would be at night. This continued for weeks, and when I confronted her about it, asking her to make time for me, she said I was being insensitive. She said she never interrupted me when I worked on my projects, so I had no right to ask her to cut down on her work. It was our first big argument. She went days without talking to me. Around the same time, our intimate life was non-existent. She barely allowed me to touch her, and we moved from doing it multiple times a week to nothing at all. She was always busy, tired, or not in the mood. I know I was the one who encouraged her to close a deal with her client, but I ended up regretting it. At one point, I was forced to look up her client on Facebook, and I found out he was as popular as she was. I even saw some of her long comments on his posts, and one of them included, "Thank you for dinner the other night." It struck a chord, because aside from being extremely busy, I didn't remember the last time June ate at home or cooked something. Whenever I called her to ask if I should make dinner for two, she told me she had already eaten. I could tell that there was something off with her and her new client, because she had worked with other big clients in the past, and it was never like that. She didn't spend the entire evening talking to them on the phone or depriving me of her wifely duties. I didn't want to check her phone so she wouldn't know I suspected something. Instead, I hired a private investigator to follow her. A few days later, I got the news that broke my heart. June was having an affair with her big client, and I was devastated. Although I wanted it to be false, all the signs pointed to that. So much had changed about her, even how she talked to me, and I knew something was wrong. After I found out, she came home that evening and continued her cold attitude toward me. She noticed I was also cold, but she didn't bother to ask what was wrong. She didn't know the private investigator was still tailing her, and I planned to expose her. 2 days later, my PI followed them to a motel, and he told me to come to the location immediately after they entered. He got their room number, and I arrived at the motel a few minutes later. We went to their door, knocked on it, and the client answered. I forced my way in, and I found her already naked in bed, and it looked like I interrupted something. When she saw me, she started yelling at me and the PI, and didn't even show remorse for what she had done. I took out my phone and recorded them, then told her not to step in at my house again. She came home that evening, but found some of her belongings scattered on the lawn. It was a big mess, and I didn't care what the neighbors would say. Surprisingly, she realized the impact of what she had done when she came home, and she begged me to let her in so that she could explain. I didn't let her in because I knew no explanation would justify her cheating. As for the recording, I sent it to her company and texted it to her family members. I wanted everyone to see the beast she was, and they did. She didn't want to leave my house, but when I threatened I would call the police, she left. Most of the neighbors recorded her as she banged on my door to beg me, which was embarrassing for her. The next day, her company did not waste time firing her, and she was told not to contact the client again. The company also stopped working with the client, and his reputation was ruined. Ultimately, she lost her job, and her reputation with family was ruined. We also divorced because I wanted nothing to do with her again. Funnily enough, she kept calling to beg, but it was over between us. Her family was also disappointed in her that they wanted nothing to do with her. It was a very painful experience, and I have moved on, but I've not remarried. I'm unsure I will, but let's see how life goes.